I'm Stephanie Cooke, writer of Racc Pack, and you are listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Stephanie Cooke about her graphic novel, The Racc Pack, from Simon Schuster. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Stephanie Cooke is an award-winning writer of graphic novels such as Paranorthern, Oh My Gods, and the Racc Pack series. She's an avid reader, gamer, movie watcher, and pun connoisseur. Moreover, Stephanie resides in the City of Raccoons, that's Toronto, Canada, where she often curls up with her very snuggly cat that she happens to be very allergic to. For the latest graphic novel, illustrator Whitney Gardner provides her contribution to this new foray entitled The Racc Pack. Now available in major bookstores, The Racc Pack is a story of the Bin family, a trio of raccoons in the risky business of dumpster diving for all their needs. With Dusty's brains, Riri's muscles, and Scrap's gadgets, please don't tell him he's almost definitely an opossum, the Binses are determined to leave no garbage bin unturned in their pursuit of the tastiest, most delicious trash they can find. When the family discovers a new upscale grocery store that's throwing away their perfectly good food at the end of the day, the Binses hatch a heist so daring it'll have them rolling in garbage all winter long. But a critter-despising CEO, Jeff Beans, and the high-tech defense system he's installed means liberating that trash is going to take all the skills a Racc Pack have, and maybe some help from a cat burglar with a mysterious past. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Stephanie Cooke about her new graphic novel, The Racc Pack, from Simon & Schuster. Stephanie Cooke, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you so much for having me. As always, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always great to talk to you. I know that we've met several times. Most recently, I think it was a Mississauga Comic Expo.
Yes.
We were doing stuff there, and you're meeting there with all sorts of people, which is great.
Yes.
Lots of books around, lots of new titles, new people to meet, lots of good stuff. So with that in mind, I want to ask you, what's on your bedside reading table? What are you reading today?
Oh my gosh. I'm currently reading, obviously I know I do a lot of kid-lit stuff and graphic novels for young readers, but I do read a lot of novels. I love reading. I'm a pretty voracious reader. Right now I'm reading a book by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is called Malibu Rising. I think one of her biggest books in the last little while was Daisy Jones and the Six, which got turned into a big TV show last year, which I read the book, loved it. Watched the show, I loved it. So now I'm reading some more of her stuff. And that is what I'm currently reading, along with, I just received 6 volumes of Witch Hat Atelier, the manga. So those things are what's kind of next on my list after that.
Yeah, it's going to keep you busy for a while, that's for sure.
Yeah. I got very into my post-holidays gift card redemption with books. So
cool. Lots of good stuff. Good. Well, we're here talking about your latest graphic novel, The Racc Pack, and I want to congratulate you on your new book coming out. I know it takes a lot of time. People just assume, oh, you just did that overnight, but there's a lot of effort that goes into it. So for those people who don't know what the book's about, how would you briefly describe it?
Well, I would tell people that it is about 2 raccoons and a possum who thinks he's a raccoon. They go on a heist for the best garbage ever. That's kind of the brief elevator pitch. Yeah, that's in summary what it's all about. It's delightful. It's set in Toronto. Our city is highlighted here, which I'm just so proud of. I'm so in love with. And I really am just so over the moon that you get to meet these delightful characters.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of hilarity, perhaps, with these characters and the different antics that go on in the story.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm a bit of a ding-dong where, I will be the first person to laugh at my own jokes. If you can't laugh at your own jokes, who else is gonna? So I personally think it's very funny. I'm very proud of it. I loved working with Whitney, and I really just can't wait to share this. It's by far the most fun I've had writing something. And I hope that comes through. And I hope everybody who reads it has as much fun with it as I had writing it.
I'm sure they will. But I want to ask you then, who is the audience for this book? Did you write it for any particular type of audience, age group, that sort of thing?
I mean, I think we've maybe talked about this before. I'm like a very big advocate for an all ages book. I think I try my best to write things that anyone can read and enjoy. Anyone can pick this up and enjoy it. And I'm trying to be very mindful of that when I'm crafting a story. I'm not trying to do something with like kind of cheeky jokes for adults I might be reading. I'm not trying to like, dumb it down for younger audiences. I just want to write a fun story that anyone can pick up and be like, this is a good time. But that being said, publishers like to put things into boxes, and it is technically a middle grade book. It's technically a younger middle grade book. I think grades 2 to 5, ages 7 to 10. But again, I do think anyone can pick this up and hopefully find joy in it. Who doesn't love raccoons, John? Who?
That's true, except when they're in your garbage. So,
I guess,
but it sounds like your bunch are a different crowd. So I think they can be treated with certain respect. So
well,
I understand.
They're not in other people's garbage too, but I think their delightful quips and puns maybe make up for it.
Sure. So I wanted to ask you, in its recent review, Publishers Weekly said this book contains ecological messaging. So with that, I'm wondering, what do you hope readers take away after enjoying your book?
Yeah, I mean, I think Whitney and I were trying to make a book that was fun while balancing social messages, that are relevant to our world today. So the Bins family, that is the name of the raccoons. They are the Bins. They are dusty bins, scraps bins, and recycling bins, but she goes by Riri. And they're tackling kind of food waste. I don't know if you're aware of this, but like grocery stores kind of have like a hierarchy of their produce and stuff. And the cheaper produce that you see at like No Frills or kind of like value grocery stores are considered usually like the ugly fruit. It's like the things that aren't as desirable for higher end food chains. And a lot of fruit and food in general gets like thrown out because it's like not up to a certain aesthetic. So I don't think we get into it too heavily, but we do tackle the fact that grocery stores do throw away food, stores throw away clothes. All of these like chains throw away things because of minor fault, and they don't necessarily donate them to, shelters or people in need. They throw them in the garbage. And we do tackle a little bit of that in this book. The Bins' heist that they go on is at a store called The Well-Being, and it is run by a man named Jeff Beans. And so he doesn't want to part with this food. He doesn't want to give it away. He wants it to go in the garbage. And why shouldn't the raccoons have that? So we tackle a little bit of that alongside the shenanigans.
Right. Well, I think anyone who's paying attention to the news these days, these are themes that are very prominent. So I'm sure it's lurking in the background there for sure. You mentioned her name already. Whitney Gardner is your illustrator. Can you talk about how you two met?
Yeah. So Whitney is just the best. She's the best. But our origin story, so to speak, goes back to when I was working on Paranorthern. My editor at the time was talking to me about comparable titles and things that we envisioned, were along the same lines as Paranorthern. Because again, marketing professionals want to know that so they know who to market a book to. They want to know all of that to understand the audience. And one of the titles that they told me about was Fake Blood. And that is one of Whitney's books. I hadn't read it yet. So they told me, they were like, I think this is really akin to Fake Blood. Have you checked it out? So I did. I read it. I loved it. It's just such a delight. It's all about a young boy who has a crush on his classmate who's obsessed with vampires. So he decides to pretend to be a vampire in order to win her affection, only to discover that what she's actually into is vampire hunting. So it is a really delightful little boy meets girl story. And I just loved the idea, the humor, everything about it. And so Whitney and I started following Whitney. We started talking. I asked Whitney to blurb Paranorthern when it came time for that. She read it. And I think we both realized between me reading Fake Blood and Whitney reading Paranorthern that we had very similar sensibilities and senses of humor. And we just kind of started talking and hit it off. And Whitney asked me, if I would want to do something with her. And, it was like an instant yes. Like, it was just like, see the message come in and just like, yes, like anything, please. And that's really where it kicked off. And we just knew we wanted to work on something together and see what we can come up with. So
that's really cool. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's not too often you get to meet someone who gels with you when you're working on a project, so I'm glad to hear. Maybe you could talk a bit about the collaboration process. Now, typically, some writers will come up with the entire script and say, okay, illustrator, off you go, and I'll talk to you in like whenever. How did it work with you and Whitney in coming up with this one?
This was a full co-creation process. We are co-creators. This is not like a writer, artist, situation. Sure, like I wrote the script, Whitney did the art, but the story itself was developed and created by the both of us. Whitney's in Victoria, so we did a lot of Zoom calls where we were like, what do we want to do? We had this idea that we wanted to write something about raccoons, and it was like, what? So we came up with the story, we came up with the characters entirely together. We threw around a bunch of kind of like plots and kind of tried to figure out what stuck. But then when we had the idea of where we wanted to go, we built the entire outline together, like beat for beat, in a really detailed outline and skeleton. So we did that as partners, as co-creators. And then I went in and did the script, and Whitney did like the character design and concepting and the art for the book. But this was a partnership from the beginning where the story is ours. It is both of ours. It's just been such a fun project to work on.
Great to hear. Yeah, that's for sure. I'm glad it worked out. In my research, I noticed that you and Whitney both did a podcast called the Capercast, which sounded a lot of fun. I'm wondering, do you think that might be something you'd restart in the near future?
We have talked about it so much. For anybody who has listened to the Capercast and is listening to this, you may know that we love Chicken Run. It is one of the first films that we covered, and there is now a Chicken Run 2. And if we can't make a comeback to talk about Chicken Run 2, I don't even know. But we have talked about doing this. We've talked about making a comeback. We never meant for it to kind of go on hiatus, but life kind of just got in the way. Racc Pack was kind of like ramping up, and unfortunately, it just fell to the wayside a bit. But we both really, really loved researching these movies together, watching them, and then discussing it. It was like such a highlight of my life at that time to like do that with Whitney. And I do really want to bring it back. So hopefully someday, fingers crossed.
Yeah, sounds like a plan for sure. Now, in addition to doing podcast interviews such as this, I'm wondering what other efforts will you undertake to promote your book? Will you be at any events in the future too?
Yeah, I'm currently in the thick of it right now, trying to kind of plan out my year, but I've got a few confirmed shows coming up, a few definitely in Toronto. I will be at TCAF for sure. I will be at Toronto Comic Con in March. I will be at Fan Expo in the summer. I just today confirmed that I'm going to be doing a store indie creators kind of like mini con thing at their store at Wayside Comics in Newmarket, and that'll be February 24th, I believe. All that information I'm going to be putting on my website in the appearances section, but I'm trying to kind of finalize things right now and do kind of as much as possible to get the word out about this book. I'm so proud of it, and I've got this and 4 other things out this year, so it's just going to be go, John.
Yeah, for sure. No, it sounds like it. That's for sure. No, the reason I ask is as this is being published by Simon and Schuster, and a lot of creators come up with their own books, and until you be your own hype person, it just sits there. So you really have to beat the bushes, so to speak. Yeah. You have to be out there and trying to garner more attention. Do you find that the results are great when you're speaking about it as opposed to others people speak on your behalf?
it's always nice to have somebody in your corner, like hyping up your book. Like I wish I could just live in the middle of nowhere and make things, and then they find enough success to warrant me continuing to get work, like I wish that was the case. But at the same time, I'm very proud of what I've done. I want to talk about it. I want to talk to, like, when I'm making kids' books, there's nothing better than to talk to kids who have read my books and to hear them be so excited about stuff. Like, that's why I make things, like I was such a big user of the library as a kid. I didn't really have a lot of like books of my own. And it just like makes me happy to interact with people who are, whether they're experiencing at the library or picking up a book for themselves, it makes me happy to see that they're getting out there in the world. It makes it that much more real. But like the kind of state of publishing and creating in general is that, for the most part, unless you're like Dav Pilkey or Raina Telgemeier, you have to be your own hype person. There is no other option unless you are at a level in which they are going to give you a massive chunk of their marketing budget. You are your marketing budget. You are the person that's going to do it, and you cannot rely on anyone else. And that sucks, because those two people are probably the two people in graphic novels that the publicity the least. Not that they don't deserve it, but it should just be, I feel like, spread amongst all of the books that publishers acquire.
That's true.
And that's just simply not the case. So,
right. Well, you do a good job at it. That's for sure. Whenever I see you at these shows, you're always there, very positive. You're meeting with people, and I think it'll work out great for you. That's for sure. Now, speaking about work, I want to know, what's your next project? Did they think there might be a second volume of the Racc Pack coming soon?
Yeah. So actually, this is the first in a new series. So all of the books are completely standalone, which we briefly discussed before we start recording, that you were curious if volume 1 meant, an ongoing thing. They're labeled solely so that the order in which they came out. But there is a Racc Pack 2 coming January 2025, and hopefully more to come after that. But they are standalone. They are delightful adventures of the Binns family, the continued adventures of the Binns family, as they get into more shenanigans and capers, and hopefully with a little bit more of like adjacent social issues to kind of talk about as well within those stories.
Sure. Yeah. Well, something to look forward to. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you're a comic book professional, graphic novel creator professional as well. I want to ask you, what would be the one piece of advice that you want to pass along to someone who wants to make their own book? What would you say to that person?
I know this is like an awful thing to say because people get like overwhelmed, but like, just do it. Don't make excuses for yourself and be like, well, when I don't have a like full-time job, when I don't have this, when I don't, like, life is always going to throw things at you. And, like, I'm fortunate right now for this to be my full-time job, but for a very long time, I juggled a full-time day job, editing and writing all kind of at the same time, as well as kind of other passion projects. And that's not to say that everyone can do that and everyone has the capacity for that, but you just kind of have to be your own hype person. You have to be passionate and excited about your projects. And, not everyone has a 200-300 page graphic novel in them, but you can work on short stories. You can work on things that make you happy and allow you to kind of like pour your creativity into, a project and kind of keep your soul alive, is how it felt for me. Like I needed creativity to kind of like keep me from losing my mind during my day job and stuff. So I kind of just feel like, don't wait for the right time. Make the right time the right time. Like, just you just got to like do it and practice and have fun with it.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. For sure. Now, you hinted at it before that you're going to have all your different activities going on your website. Where can people find you online to find out about your current and your future projects?
Yeah. So obviously social media is a bit in flux at the moment. So as far as social media goes, I'm most active on Instagram currently. My username is Hello Cookie. And then my website is stephaniecooke.ca, and that's Cooke with an E on the end of it. And that links all of my socials. I have a blog there. I have all of my books there, my appearances, everything that you could possibly want to know about me is on that site. I recommend that in lieu of our collapsing social media.
Okay, sure. Well, Stephanie, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
Yeah, my website, go check me out there. I also have a few other things coming out this year. I have a My Little Pony story in the annual coming out in March called Main Event. I have my first young adult graphic novel coming out in April called Pillow Talk, which is also set in Toronto. So stoked. A trade of a My Little Pony miniseries I did last year coming out in May. And another couple of things later in the year. So you can look forward to all of those and more. And if I'm at any conventions that you'll also be at, I'm sure you will see those wares on my table. But yeah, other than that, I think that covers it.
Thanks to Stephanie for the chat. You can discover more about Stephanie on Instagram at Hello Cookie and online at stephaniecooke.ca. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. You can follow along at True North Country Comics on most social media sites. Please send any and all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2024.